Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the City Council and Parks and Community Services Commission joint special meeting for January 25th, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Perkins.
Here.
Councilmember Rubio. Here. Councilmember Veros.
Here.
Vice Mayor Armstrong.
Here.
Commissioner Ellicott Pesky. Oops, sorry.
Pesic here.
Commissioner Lopez Lucy. Commissioner Mitra.
Here.
Commissioner Osland.
Here.
Vice Chair Dorlick.
Here.
And Chair Kingston Lee.
Here.
Mayor Hudson and Commissioner Breed will not be with us this evening.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to unfinished business. So tonight we're going to be reviewing options for the Crow Canyon Gardens Master Plan. And as you see on the agenda, this is going to be a review of options, and we're going to provide feedback to the staff. So this is the way we're going to do things tonight. I just talk a little bit about the sequence. We're going to go through the staff report first. Then we're going to go to questions, and I'll defer to Commissioner Keniston Lee. Yeah, we got two Heidis in the house tonight.
It's confusing.
To kind of go through the commission with questions, and then I'll facilitate with the council for questions. And if at that time you could just keep it to questions, because we will have public comment to follow, and then we will go through comments. And again, it will go through with the commission and then with the council. And then if at the end, we'll have an opportunity to kind of have some roundtable discussion as necessary and make sure that the staff has everything that they need. And we'll ask Kathy Hyman if she did get everything she needed, and to provide us a roll up and then maybe a summary of the next steps. Okay, so that's how we're going to go with things. And so at this time, I'd like to invite Kathy Hyman up, or Robin Bartlett to come up and introduce tonight's topic.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, and good evening to you and the City Council and the Parks Commission. So I think this has been a bit of a long-awaited evening to get these concepts before you and allow you a chance to give us feedback as to where to go with these concepts. Before I introduce our main presenters, which is our architect for this project, our landscape architect, I'd like to do a brief review of where we were, how we got here. So the project scope and what we're talking about this evening is the development of the master plan for the Crow Canyon Gardens Park. And that included an assessment of the existing Muds restaurant and how that building would be incorporated into the Crow Canyon Gardens project. And just to remind you where we left that off with the City Council about a year ago was that we were going to try and preserve a building, an element, a portion of it as kind of the jewel to incorporate into the rest of the project. However, this is, of course, a lot bigger than just Muds. This is about looking to develop a new conceptual design for the Crow Canyon the Crow Canyon Gardens Park. So we're looking to come up with new concepts for the design with the building and park updates with that support the activities that have been ongoing in that park. Also improve site accessibility and retain the natural setting of the park. So together with staff, we've been working with Placework, our landscape architects. Here tonight is Isabel Min and Spence Kohler. They have also been working with Page and Turnbull, the architects who have been focused on the Muds element. And we have Lada Korcharovsky and Greg Yanito. Just a little bit of a recap, and I won't go into all of this, but I think you're all aware of the long history of this Muds element and of the Gardens Park. a big turning point in the park was the 2017, really 2018 acquisition of the Muds property and the opportunity to incorporate that additional land into the Crow Canyon Gardens Park. And so with that, that kicked off a lot of discussions, a lot of input from the public, and ultimately ended up in 2022 with city hiring our consultants, who are the architects, the landscape architect I just mentioned, to develop this plan based on the input we'd received from the Parks Commission and from City Council. And so they've been hard at work developing these concepts, and they're going to go through that with you this evening. And we'll take any feedback you have and incorporate that into developing the final master plan for the park. And with that, I will turn things over to Isabel.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Hi, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. I'm Isabel Min. I'm a principal and landscape architect with PlaceWorks, our design, planning, and community engagement firm. And we're really fortunate to have had the opportunity to do the assessment work and look at developing concept ideas for the park. And you know, I'm just going to start and talk a little high level about the site, and then turn it over to Greg to focus in on the building, which I know is kind of the impetus for this process. I think folks are really familiar with the park setting, but just from our view, it's a real gem. It's a peaceful, passive recreation park, really different from most or many of the parks in the community, and it's pretty. It's got some features that are extremely loved, and also many features that we've found. You know, there's some nuggets, jewels of community serving uses that maybe could be enhanced in terms of access. Experience for people of all ages, and improving accessibility. So I'll talk a little bit more about those when we talk about the concepts, but we do see some opportunities. But I think, you know, in a nutshell, the park is a gem that wants to be preserved and integrated with whatever happens to the building that we'll be discussing tonight. Just a few slides showing the existing conditions. As you know, the gardens and the orchards are maintained by volunteers. So there's these different zones with different partners or future partners really interested in participating. I think we know that the community gardens are very popular, and there's definitely demand for additional access to those. And then just looking at the trail, the trails, there are some formal, slightly more formal trails and pathways in the gardens and trails around the park. And then there's a great opportunity for access to the creek. But this trail is not currently formalized, which is some of the charm of the trail, but it's also has some limited accessibility for people of different abilities. So we want to think about that a little, both the site-wide access and accessibility, and the trails that might be enhanced. And with that, I'll turn it over to talk a little more in a focused conversation about the architecture, the building, the work that Paige and Turnbull did, and then we'll come back and talk about how those might fit in some other additional park-wide ideas and concepts. So with that, I'll call Greg Anito with Paige and Turnbull.
Is it Greg or Craig?
It's Greg with a G.
Greg. Okay, thank you.
Got it. Good evening. My name is Greg with a G from Paige and Turnbull. I'm a senior associate and a planner, and we're thrilled to be working with PlaceWorks on this. This is a very, fantastic opportunity to look at a community asset. We started looking at the MUDS building, using the 2018 and 2019 reports as our starting point or our springboard. And the first thing, we wanted to do is understand what's been looked at already. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, but rather confirm some of the findings. We looked at the building to understand what the original design intent was. And I'm not going to read the slides verbatim, but I think everybody understands that this building has like a home comfort feel. It's a home away from home for the people that remember it. Jumping to the second bullet point, I think one thing that we recognized was it seems to be a building that took the environment into consideration when it was designed, much like some of the Sea Ranch buildings did in the mid-70s. It has an emphasis on a east-west layout and orientation. A lot of natural light was built into the design. It has solar water storage set up. It has obviously natural materials with the ceiling and the wood shake siding. We then looked at it from the perspective of what are the predominant character features. From a designer or an architect's view, some of those features include the axial layout, the gable roof form, the indoor and the outdoor connectivity, and the central tower that sticks up really kind of stuck out to us because you can see it from many different parts of the park. And from a user's perspective, the character defining features or the predominant character features we felt again were the tower. From the inside, you see that tower and the light that it lets in. The ceiling, of course, the beautiful wood ceiling, and the wood shake siding, again, a natural material that can't be ignored. So when we looked at the building, the conditions, as many of you know, it's not in the greatest state of repair right now. The kitchen is, flooded probably after the last week's rains. The roof is in very poor condition. The building systems are in fair, they're outdated, and it does not meet any current code as far as accessibility. Here's some photos. You can see the damage to the ceiling inside. These are mostly of the kitchen. We did find that the dining rooms themselves were in fair condition. They were in much better shape than the kitchen. But again, mechanical and electrical systems are poor. The envelope is in fair shape. The seismic was not evaluated, but overall the building does seem structurally sound. So once we took that into consideration, our next task was to look at what some of the options were for the building for reuse. I'm going to show you 4 options here that we studied. We looked at 4 options to kind of make sure we do our due diligence and look at the breadth of options. The first one, which would be to reuse most of the building except for the area that's failing at the kitchen. And in this diagram, you can see this kind of, I think it's a T shape. The kitchen and back of house areas have been removed. This would retain the primary axis of the building as well as one dining room. It would remove the lounge space, turn that into a landscaped garden area. And we would likely, if this was to be an enclosed space, we would reintroduce a small kitchenette. Again, as you'll see in most of these schemes, actually all of these schemes, the cedar ceiling or some remnant of that ceiling would be retained. We also looked at full demolition. This was identified in the 2019 report. We looked at that to verify. We went through a cost exercise to verify, and we did identify that what was done then, we escalated the cost up to 2022, including re-landscaping the area where the building has been demolished, and the range of cost is somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 to demolish. The next 2 slides are our next 2 options are ways that we can reuse the building in a little bit, not an ordinary, but a little different approach. The first one is to basically retain the structure, but open it all up into a shade structure. Basically remove all the walls, rebuild the structure such as the columns, reinforced columns, but keep the ceiling and keep all the wings. Therefore, we have a park shade structure at the existing location, surrounded by a number of gardens on either side. Here's a rendering of what that could look like. You can see right in the middle is that landmark tower that kind of orients you in the park. But all the walls have been opened up. We've roughly estimated that this would have a capacity of about 100 to 150 people underneath the shade structure. And a restroom facility could be done adjacent in one of the storage sheds. Cost range for this is approximately $900 to $1 million as of last year. The second option we looked at keeps one room of the structure, that center community room, one of the dining rooms, as what we've been referring to as the jewel box, or a remembrance or a envisioning of that space that's always been there. So there's something that remains that's still enclosed. It's a reservable space. It's something that the community can use. It would, probably be a 20 to 30% occupancy room, but the rest of the structure is again a shade structure or a picnic pavilion. And it would look something like this. Again, the tower is created. And the cost range for this one, as of last year, is in the $1 to $1.1 million range. And with that, I will turn it back to Isabel.
Thanks, Greg. So we wanted to kind of start with the building, since that was a little more the focus, but I am gonna talk through some ideas that we had, incorporating one of those options that Greg presented into a larger site plan. Again, these are high-level concepts that once we hear back tonight, we would work to further refine and add more detail to. So they're a little more diagrammatic in terms of the zones, but you can see the proposed areas and activities, the landscape, the massing, and the circulation in these two park options A and B. So park option A shows major entrances coming from Park Place. So the pink arrows show kind of key access points. This option proposes some additional parking at the turnaround on Park Place, and that would be requiring pulling cutting into the park a little bit to allow for that perpendicular parking there at the front. The parking that is currently, I think we showed the creek scour line in an earlier graphic, but that the parking lot is reduced in this option, pulling back away from the eroding edge. So we've added some parking along Park Place to accommodate for vehicular parking. The community garden beds would be expanded by approximately 10 spaces. We know that there's an interest in additional access to those plots. The perimeter walking path shown in the tan color is shown as a accessible path, but it would be a DG, decomposed granite surface. So kind of in keeping with the passive nature and kind of more natural feel of the park. This would be a kind of more, I guess, crunchy surface, but also still able to improve accessibility for folks wanting a perimeter pathway around the entire park. As I mentioned, I haven't mentioned, there would be a gravel surface vehicular access road to the garden coming in. So again, not paved, a gravel road. We heard that there was the interest in having vehicular access along the edge of the community garden beds. We've included a nature play area. So again, in keeping with this idea of a passive recreation park, but it's a large space. The meadows, big, wide, and open, and can accommodate kind of passive play, but we thought be something to consider, a nature play area with maybe climbable logs, and these are gaining popularity in other communities. And I think you may have nature play here already. So, you know, it's just one option. We'll show you some images and talk a little more about it. I mentioned the parking, and I think the total parking spaces does reduce from the total available parking. But I think, you know, what we can see is that there's a reduced need for as much parking as there is, especially if the building is not serving as much high volume use. Now, park option B. Oh, I didn't mention the cost for all of the park uses. Again, at a planning level, this is not including anything that happens to the building, but for the park improvements that I presented would be around 2.1 to 2.2 million. Okay, and so for park option B, this has a bit more activation. Again, it's still a passive recreation park concept, but it has some more hardscape surfaces for accessibility. It has an additional shade structure in the center of the park near the community garden beds. It adds closer to 20 community garden plots. And the pathway around the park would be paved. So a harder surface, a little more formalized, but again, increasing accessibility. So I mentioned the central connecting path. That's kind of one of the key distinguishing concepts between the two ideas. Again, there would be a nature play area. Some of the same zones are carried over in each of them, maybe organized a little differently. And you've had time to look at these concepts, but I can answer questions about them. The new parking is added. There's a few new parking spaces along Park Place, but it's more of a drop off, so it doesn't cut into the park as much as option A. And we've left more parking spaces in this option at the existing parking lot. It's still pulled back a bit because of the erosion, but the option A had more reduction of parking. And the other big difference would be we've proposed an ADA or at least a more accessible trail to the creek. Probably not. It's probably not possible to get an accessible trail all the way down, but at least to the first bench, we did a preliminary look that there would be a way to do a switchback trail to that first bench that is more accessible, if not fully wheelchair accessible. And both of these options would include interpretive and wayfinding signage as kind of an added amenity that's not too costly, but could help orient people to the park and maybe have some interpretive and educational panels. So this slide kind of sums it all up. The comparison of the two building options that Greg presented, as well as the two park options that I presented. And kind of at the bottom of each list highlights the differences between the two. So many of the things are carried over in the different options with the open air pavilion and the open air and enclosed room options, you know, the key difference. And then with the parks, option B having a few more amenities, a new restroom would be constructed in that option. It would include more of a shade structure in the center of the park and kind of a connection from one end to the other. And the ADA accessible trail I mentioned. And then we did include a palette of some of the key features and materials that could be considered just to be in keeping. So I'll just go over these images really quickly just to give you a sense of, you know, ideas about the features, the materials that could be used, and then we'll take some input tonight and again, come back with more detail, design ideas. Some images of outdoor kitchen, how, you know, the idea of keeping in the spirit of the architecture and the materials that are there is very important. And then I mentioned earlier, adding some shade structures, picnic tables, and seating sprinkled throughout the park, and that these should be carefully placed, but would provide a few more places for enjoying the setting. Greg mentioned the importance or the value of some of the materials inside. So I think we all support that and the idea of reusing or retaining that character in any of the new features that are included. So with that, I'll pause and I think we're all available for questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Greg, for that. At this time, what I'd like to do is I'll turn it over to Chair Councilman Lee, and if you could, we'll go for clarifying questions.
Mhm.
We're going to hold comments till later on after public comment. We'll go with questions for now, and we'll go with the commission first, and
Yeah.
then we'll run over to the council.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go in order, and I'm going to start with Commissioner Osland. Do you have any clarifying questions?
Yes, thanks, Chair
Uh-huh.
Kennison Lee. Thank you, Vice Mayor Armstrong, and thank you, presenters. Beautiful work. Clarifying question that I have is, when we provide our feedback, can we combine elements from the options that have been presented? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes. Yes, both of these on both, I think Greg can answer for the architecture. That is possible, but a little trickier with the building to mix and match pieces. But speaking for the park and the building options, the elements from park option A and B can definitely be intermixed. So, you know, it's just showing a range tonight. And I think the idea would be we can create a whole new concept for the park. And I think with the building, there's some flexibility as well, but I won't
Okay.
speak for Greg.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also wanted to clarify, is there shade cover in option 1? Is there shade?
I don't think we proposed, the option 2 proposed kind of a larger shade structure in the center near the meadow. But no, it was just a way to make them different.
So option 1, there is no shade covering in that F.
Oh, you
footprint.
mean as part of the building?
Mhm.
It is still a pavilion. Maybe I can go.
So
back
no
to the image.
walls, but will there be
There-
a roof?
Yes.
Yes.
You're welcome to come up if you want to talk about the building. There we go.
Commissioner Osland, you're talking about a shaded pavilion, the shaded pavilion.
Correct. Yes.
So yes, there is
Yes.
a roof. There is a roof over the pavilion. It's
For option 1.
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify that. And then I saw a kitchen in option B, but on the map, on the drawing, but I didn't see it in option A. But on the list, it did say kitchen in option A and option B, but I didn't see it in the drawing. Yeah, So I just want to clarify,
The
is-
outdoor kitchen.
will be in
concept-
both.
Well, it could be in both, but it was meant to be in A. I
Okay,
don't know if we-
Okay. Okay, great. And then that's all my questions for now. Thank
Okay.
you.
Commissioner Mitra?
Hi, great presentation. Thank you. Thank you for that. I have a couple of questions. Number one is I heard somebody say that there was a request to reduce the parking space. Because that was one of my questions as well as going through that we are redesigning. So we are expecting more crowd, like 150 people can sit down, do a big bar, and then there was garden. So I was just wondering, why don't we are trying to keep that same number of spaces that we already have, 47, because we are going down like 30% of the parking spaces. That one of the questions on that. So
Okay.
I have a couple of others, but yeah.
I don't think we were making a deliberate attempt to reduce parking. But there's kind of a balance with the environmental conditions at the parking lot that the parking area definitely needs some resurfacing and some work. And there's definitely, the need to pull back. So I think the one option that doesn't reduce it as much is maintaining some of the existing trees that are in that parking lot. That's kind of one of the main differences, but with the idea that we're deactivating, there's not the same level of use with the building. We just wanted to show an option that had slightly less of a footprint, especially on that end of the park, especially if one of the more minimal, smaller spaces was going to be selected for
Okay. I mean, my only thing is like when we are redesigning, we expect people, we want people to come in, like we have a great new area. I'm pretty sure people will be coming along with the new designing. So I'm actually expecting more people there personally on that. And I wondered with only 20 to 30 parking spaces, it'll overflow. Again, that's my feeling. I had the same feeling about same question about the kitchen. So we got that answered. Similar question I have about the restroom in the option A. I see in the list there is a restroom, existing one. So is it the restroom with the building, the existing restroom that you are talking about, or because I don't see that unless I'm missing something in the picture in the garden layout here, there's a restroom here specifically mentioned on the option A. Option B, I see that, but not option A. But in the list, it says there is a restroom.
I think in any case, there needs to be a restroom in this area.
Absolutely.
So we feel that way. If it wasn't unclear, it wasn't
Okay, all right.
intentional, but
All right.
there needs to be a restroom, whether it's in the existing sheds that are there or there's a new restroom
So they will be there.
built.
Okay.
There will be one no matter what.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Lopez Lucy.
Yes, thank you. I just a question on option A. It doesn't show or it doesn't state in here on option B, it has an outdoor kitchen. Is there not an outdoor kitchen in option A?
Did I misspeak? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's in there, but you don't have it on the list here.
Yes, I don't think we highlighted as a feature of option A. So if I misspoke, I meant outdoor kitchen near the building. I think part of the issue is the outdoor kitchen is more of a feature of what happens at the building site. So the building site has two options. And we wanted that conversation to happen a little bit independently of the park site. So I think if there's lots of support for an outdoor kitchen, it can be done with any of these concepts.
Okay,
Is that it? Commissioner Lopez Lucy?
thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ellicott Pesek.
So I want to hopefully wrap up this because that was part of mine. What I'm seeing is on the building, option 1 and 2. In either case, there is an outdoor kitchen. So in the building site, it looks to me, based on the list, in either case, we have a kitchen. When we come to the park, we have a potential second kitchen if we choose plan option B. Does that make sense? Because I'm seeing building option 1 has outdoor kitchen with sink, barbecue, and refrigerator, sticking with the building. Building option 2, outdoor kitchen with sink, barbecue, and refrigerator. So it looks to me like the options you presented in either case suggest an outdoor kitchen at the building site.
Yeah, this
Right.
is on that
The
comparisons
comparison.
page on
Yes.
packet page 33 is where the
Right.
confusion is there.
And then if once you get there, so it's basically, it's 5th down or so on the building side of things, right? Am I seeing that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And then when we go over to the park, I see what I would consider a second kitchen if we chose park plan B, not A, but B. Does that seem right? Like that there's a potential for 1 kitchen or 2 kitchens?
I think our intention was there would be one kitchen,
Options,
one
yeah.
outdoor kitchen
Yeah.
in either combination of schemes.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it would be either at the park or at the building.
Yes, but I actually, in any case, the outdoor kitchen is where the building was. It's
Okay.
kind of at that
So it's
site.
not, so I think that's what's confusing.
Yeah.
In park option B, where you have the additional 3 options past A, that's what's confusing, is it looks like that's a proposal
Yes,
for a second
yes.
kitchen. So we should cross that off at least
We
as
should
to what
strike
you
that from
intended.
being tied to the park concept.
They were
Okay,
just
yeah.
really excited about a kitchen.
We all love kitchens.
Yeah.
I'm excited about a kitchen, but that was one of my big questions. Are we talking about 2 or are we talking about 1? I think we've resolved it
We're
now.
good. We're good,
Okay.
Yeah.
And we could add a second kitchen. I don't,
Now let's not go to, but your proposal is
One.
one,
in either
and
option.
that's the main thing we're clarifying question.
Correct.
And then I think the other thing was the proposal includes 1 shade structure in the park area as park option B, not A currently.
Correct.
And the whole building basically is a shade structure of sorts. So my follow-up question on the building is when I look at the cedar roof that we've talked about, it's, okay, getting out of comments, spectacular, but no, I wanted to clarify, it is beautiful, but one of my questions is, it would now become an outdoor ceiling. And so have we thought about how we maintain, like, is that something doable with our freezes, with our rains, et cetera? Is it meant to be, or can it still be an outdoor element, though it was designed and built for as an indoor ceiling?
So yes, it is designed to be an indoor ceiling. So in order to preserve it outdoors, it would need to be either treated in a certain way. Or we've talked about removing it and rebuilding it with an outdoor material,
Got it. Okay,
one way
thank
or the
you.
other.
Wonderful, thank you.
Vice Chair Dorlip.
Yeah, no, thank you. But I just want to make sure there's a microwave, because I'm a microwave guy. That's all I need. Forget the gas, forget everything else. Has there been a consideration for maintenance on the kitchen? Is it a extensive maintenance, you think? I can see a grill, but a refrigerator. So the maintenance would be an issue from my perspective, you know.
we've talked a little bit about what would be needed, maybe a kind of, secure way to lock up the features.
Like an external lock or something like that.
Yes, I think we had a concept with kind of a roll-up door that would then lock and so be, so there's ways, I think, to do it if it's a desired element.
I mean, regarding the ceiling, it's been exposed to the elements for 20 years. So, it hasn't been in a sealed interior environment for quite a long time. Do all of these estimates include any known or estimated soil mitigation regarding the building? Because it is 1979, so it's kind of on that 1978 cusp. Although a lot of the materials that were being prohibited in 1978 were already in process in 75, 76, 77 on the way to the federal guidelines. But so is there any thought that there would need to be some soil mitigation to make sure that we're clean and it's not any kind of toxic materials that were there?
We would typically recommend a hazardous materials assessment of the building for everything, lead, asbestos, et cetera. And that has not been included yet in the cost estimate.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. If it was anticipated, it's not included in what's the estimated cost on that then? Just, we're dealing in kind of wide.
I'm going to defer to Lada on that one.
I mean, you're primarily looking at the building site itself and
Sure.
yeah,
My name is
the
Lada
footprint.
Kaczorowski. I'm an architect and principal with Page and Turnbull. I just wanted to make a quick comment in response to this. I don't think we can gauge the extent of the cost associated with potential remediation. We don't know the extent of damage or any hazardous materials that may have been found. So I think Greg is correct in recommending doing an assessment of hazmat materials, and once we have that, we can extrapolate and figure out what the cost associated with the removal of hazmat, if any, would be. But at this point, it wasn't included in the scope of work that we were undertaking as part of this study. So certainly would be the next step.
Okay, so there was an assessment before on the building. And then there's been an assessment now on the building. And in none of those assessments, there's been any even cursory testing to see if there was any evidence or potential evidence that even a surface level of any toxicity or hazardous materials that would require mitigations.
That is correct. There hasn't been a detailed testing. The early assessment suggested that there shouldn't be any, but that definitely needs to be confirmed.
Okay.
We would recommend that.
And just, again, we're dealing in, kind of like estimates here this evening. So, I mean, if there was any surface level mitigation that was required, I mean, with the footprint of the building, kind of the parameters that you'd be looking at, is it $100,000? Is it $700,000 that would add on to the cost?
Yes.
That's a great question.
Okay.
We would be glad to get back to you all on that to give you
Yeah.
a more
Robin?
reasonable.
Do you have any perspective on this?
Yeah. I understand it's a wide open question. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like saying, how much does it cost to redo a kitchen?
Yeah.
It could be $15,000, it could be $200,000.
Yeah, Robin?
Yeah, I think I can give a little bit of perspective. I think there's two issues that tie into what you're talking about. One is those materials that may be present inside the building that are hazardous, such as asbestos, would be my key concern. And I can't recall whether we've done some analysis on that. That's an easy research, and we'll add it into our final reports on that. The second is the potential for contaminated topsoil that may be around the perimeter of the building, which I think is what you're talking about. And you're right, that's always a potential concern in these areas, whether it's something that may have come off the building like lead paint or something like that, or pesticides or things like that that may have been applied to the gardens. Fortunately, I'm not heavily concerned about that, given how the past owners and what their philosophy was. Makes me at least optimistic that there isn't going to be a huge problem with regard to pesticides. And as you again indicated, it's a little bit past the dates for things like the lead paint, big concerns. So it is definitely something that we need to evaluate as we move forward and turn this into a more active park. But I suspect it's not a huge concern given a lot of the other variables that are at play in the park.
But it wasn't into any.
But it is not
estimate, so
currently
it could be an
incorporated.
additional cost if there is any.
Correct,
Discoverable.
correct.
Okay, especially with
Yeah.
the water table the way it is with the creek nearby. I mean, it could be.
Good
Yeah,
question.
something to evaluate.
Good question.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you bet. That's about it.
That's it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And I have a couple of questions, probably best answered by Kathy or Robin. This is more for the record and for our residents who might be watching. Building options 1 and 2 do in fact include cost for demolition, correct? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that would be a big, a big difference if it wasn't. So I just want to make sure, never assume. And then with regard to maintenance and operation costs, have we done any analysis for the options of what those maintenance operation costs would be? And does the preservation of a jewel box per se significantly add to maintenance and operations in terms of course, building maintenance, in terms of having staff, so forth?
Yeah, and those are great questions. I think when we did all the initial surveys, we did the maintenance cost for the full building, which was quite high. So on a smaller room like that, it'd be much more on the line of a teen center, only opened when someone was renting it or it was being used. So whilst there is cost for air conditioning and electricity, it's significantly lower than trying to operate a full community center. And again, with staffing, it would only be opened. So do I have an exact quote for you? No, because we haven't gotten all the way down to what that
Right.
exact building is or isn't, but it would be along the lines of a teen center kind of a building.
So the salient point here being that this is an additional cost that's not built in to what's being proposed here. And then what about revenue? What are our revenue projections for having a jewel room with 20 to 30 person capacity and possibly having classes and so forth? Have we talked at all about the revenue possibilities?
Yeah, there is revenue potential. It's not going to support the park. It's not going to pay for massive amounts of anything because it's a small room. This is more of an attribute. So if it's something that the commission and council want, it's going to be the kind of thing where your nature class on a rainy day is going to be able to continue. So you might have 30 kids in there doing leaf prints.
Okay.
It's going to create, if you had a picnic, let's say, in that structure, you might use that room to store your stuff beforehand, your supplies. The summer camps might store things in there and then bring them out. It would be just a small room. I don't think you would see it rented for anything significant. So therefore, its revenue potential is not really high. It's more of a addition. Most of the things that you could do in a small room like that, you could do under a shade structure or water bearing thing. The difference is a little air conditioning and a little heating.
Okay. But what I'm hearing is that there may be some functional benefits from a jewel box.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, is a nice opportunity.
Okay. Have we talked to the gardeners and have we talked to local businesses and run these options by them and gotten any feedback?
Not at this time. No, this was our first bring back to you to get some
Okay.
feedback.
Okay. Is that part of the plan?
Yeah, of course, as
Uh-huh.
we move through, if commission and council, we get your feedback and we're able to move on to a bigger plan, then we'll be able to send this out and get some feedback from all of the different groups.
Okay. And then my final question, is it possible that there will be some unique funding sources that emerge to support this project?
One could hope, certainly the park and development fees are coming in from housing. And as we know, we do have more housing on the future. And so there will be some fees coming in that way. There are also some great grants coming out of OGALS that this could potentially, we could apply for. So I think there are some opportunities that maybe didn't exist so much a few years ago.
Okay. And Crow Canyon Gardens, the project itself, has there been any inclusion in, say, the City Walk Development Agreement to provide funding for this project?
Not at this time,
Not
no.
at this time. Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over to you, Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Chair Kinnison Lee. Let me start with Councilmember Perkins, and then we'll work our way down the row here.
I just want to confirm, I've been over there a number of times, in the not too distant past, and I noticed there was parallel parking along Park Place. It is possible to park parallel to the curb. Is that your understanding? That there's not going to be any restrictions associated with parking parallel along Park Place?
Yeah, to my knowledge, the parallel parking.
Yeah, that is allowable at the
Mhm.
moment. Whether there'd be any changes, I think we'll be getting into the detail.
Well, the road appears to be wide enough to allow for parallel parking without no reason to impose red curbing along anywhere along there. Okay, so the reason I ask is because Mr. Mitra, was asking about parking, and if you did have a larger crowd, there is places along Park Place to park. The trail to the creek. Right now, it's a sloppy, muddy mess. In both of the park options, are we going to do anything, or is it just in park option B that we would improve the trail? Is there an opportunity in park A, option A, to improve the trail, not necessarily to a ADA standard, but to at least a don't slip and fall standard?
Yes, in any option, doing some, light grading and just improvement to it in its current location,
Okay.
is definitely an option.
Okay, so that was included in the estimates for both, that there would, in option A, there's some minor improvements to the trail. In option B, it's a kind of a redesign to allow for an ADA access to that first bench area. Okay. The creek scour, that is definitely going to affect some of the parking, because that bend in the creek near the parking puts some parking at risk. Is there any creek mitigation going on in any of this, or is it just, we're just gonna keep backing away from the creek as the creek kind of inches towards us.
I'm looking at Robin because
Yeah.
he's made us so aware of this creek
Yeah.
issue.
Yes, and of course, that question ties into the parking question. Really, we have not looked at doing any kind of mitigation to that creek bank, except in crude concepts. We looked at that many years ago. It is very expensive,
Yes.
very difficult to permit. And therefore, we have looked at it instead as the creek will continue to change, and that will affect that steep bank that's right there. And therefore, we're looking at setbacks from the creek bank. That's what reduces the parking.
Right. Okay. So the scouring of the creek makes it untenable to keep the parking lot at its current size and location. We really do have to move back.
We
and
at
lose
least
5 or 10 spaces. at
Yeah,
least.
we've at least planned that over time, we will lose it. We can't rely on it being there forever.
Okay. All right. That's my questions for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rubio.
So I just kind of had some questions, for clarity of like what's being preserved, not being preserved. There's the, you talked about having an open kitchen, right? Is there any thought about keeping the counter of the bar kind of being a counter for the kitchen? Yeah.
We had not talked about that, but primarily because that's an indoor feature. And if you were to, much like the ceiling, if we were to use it for an outdoor feature, we'd have to figure out a way to make it be able to withstand the elements, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
It's just that it might be like a nice little
Sure.
accent piece, when people come, you could put something there to let them know, give them a little history about what that,
Sure.
where that's from. The other thing is, sorry, I have to skip through some pages here. Are the gardens, do you feel that the gardens right now as it stands, are they being adequately used and maintained? And do you project that they will continue to be adequately used and maintained? And would it benefit us? If not, does it make sense to expand that area?
So speaking of the community garden plots, the ones that people rent to, to make a garden. And
Right.
so if we go back to the original Crow Canyon Garden survey that was done, at that time, we asked that question, and of the 1,000+ people who responded, 50% of them responded that at a high value that they should definitely be increased and or preserved and made more of. That was a highly important element. In addition, the current gardens there had a wait list of 15 people trying to get garden plots. And unfortunately, there was just nothing that we could do for them. We talked a few of them into going over to the South Garden at the Senior Center to try it out, but they are definitely all on a wait list and would like more garden plots. I think right now we successfully got 10 to go over there and try it, and we've got 5 people who are still stalwarty seeing we're waiting for spaces there.
So, but are the people who are renting it actually maintaining those as well? And using
Yes,
proper- okay.
they're exceedingly well used. If you have to probably go right now, it's winter, so there's nothing out there. But in the summer, you've got berries, lettuce, all kinds of vegetables and herbs growing. It's a really active, strong group of gardeners, and they're very bonded and connected, and they support each other. And there's just a lot of synergy and energy in that space.
Okay.
They come back year after year after year in their same plot.
It's popular, and that's why other people want to join that. I think as a recreation person, and I see that we're going to have more density as we move into the core, we're going to have a lot more people without that yard to kind of play around with gardening. So I could see that we would have more demand in the future.
Okay, and so yeah, I kind of had to share the same sentiments that were said early on. I like certain aspects of each of the options, and I almost want to swap them. There's parts of that I really like of one or the other, and I just sort of want to swap them somehow. And I don't know how we're going to go through that piece by piece, but I'd like to see if we can work with that.
I think we can. I think that's part of the intention, and specifically with those park designs, that it is a bit of a mix and match. So I think I'm looking to hear if there's elements of something that you really like, then I want to know that, and we'll be able to then kind of weave the most important elements for everyone together.
Yeah, when we get the comments, just go ahead and throw that out there, whatever those mix and match options are.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much.
Councilmember Veras.
Thank you. So I see on option 1, open air pavilion, the capacity is defined as 100 to 150 people. I'm trying to find out how many for option 2. What will be the capacity with, especially with enclosed, right? So we have some enclosed space. Enclosed room.
I think I'm trying to remember. It's on the actual slide. I think it was 52.
Yeah.
It was 20 to 30 in the small jewel box room. And wasn't it 100?
80 to 100, I think.
That's at 80,
80 to
thank you,
100.
80 to
Yeah.
100 underneath the shade structure. And that's the reason that's a little subjective is it depends if you put somebody at a picnic table or if you put them audience style. And so there is a range in there of how we could set that up and how we could use the space.
So do we have any plans like how we can use that space, or we are going to go to that level after once we get clarity on this? Okay.
Well, we can conjecture. So if you're talking about the shade structure,
Not the state, like once we get, let's say we pick open air and enclosed room. Let's say
Yes.
if we pick that option, do we have some ideas about the programs that we can run?
yes. So in the
Yeah.
summer, you'd see Summer Nature Day Camp. I'm sure they would use the room to stage some of their equipment. They would probably move kids through there for some of the special presentations. As you look at summer or classes, nature classes or gatherings, maybe even little hikes or walks, you would have a central gathering place. So they would probably meet there and then move throughout the park. Rainy inclement weather, it makes it a little more all-weather usage than rather than just being a, spring, summer, fall.
Okay.
So primarily classes and activities like that.
One of the things that when we wanted to preserve this space is especially historical landmark. That's one thing we wanted to keep in mind. So I do see that you are looking at protecting and salvaging some of existing pavers. So do we have any plan like where we want to use it? Because that's one of the historical significance that we want to preserve. Do we have any plans for that?
Yeah, I think, and correct me, but I think the plan would be to use as many of the existing pavers that are there that we can keep in their place and then add the same kind of pavers in the other places so that it blends, so that you won't hopefully know that those were the old pavers and these are the new ones.
Okay, sounds good. That's pretty much, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, going last, it looks like most of my questions have been answered, although let me just follow up on a couple things. One was on the revenue potential. You were talking about the potential for the jewel box building itself, but in terms of the open air pavilion, that would be a rented facility also, wouldn't it, for large groups?
Correct. That could be rented as a big picnic rental. So just as much like we'd rent any picnic area. And assumedly you could rent the little room with the picnic area if it wasn't being used. I think the primary concepts are, again, to make it be open and available to the public and to focus on that nature, that kind of serene environment. But absolutely, there would be revenue potential with picnic
Yeah.
area like that.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Robin, I was over there just today looking at that by the parking lot, and I mean, that scouring has gone all the way up to the edge of where the curb is now, and even that orange plastic webbing that had kind of been a security barrier, that's down at the bottom of the hill right now. So that was a pretty big storm we had, but that is definitely going to be an issue in the future. I don't know that we need to mitigate it, but I think we definitely got to figure out whatever the setback is, because that thing is potentially still gonna go.
Yeah, I
scour.
went and looked at it and it hasn't changed much, but there's continued erosion. What's a little worrisome is these things happen in fits and starts.
Yeah.
And so we have evaluated setback and it is incorporated into these concepts.
Okay. All right. And then thank you. On the outdoor kitchen, sink, barbecue, refrigerator. There's been a lot of discussion on that, but and microwave. I think you probably already answered my question, but my concern was vandalism, not so much, either exposure or that sort of thing. But I mean, if we put in a really nice outdoor kitchen and refrigerator and things like that, I do think, have we thought through how we might secure that? I think I heard options of a potential storage or a wall or something, a roll down or something.
I think there's a desire for a little nicer of an outdoor kitchen space. When you think about it again, like I'm going to have my family picnic, and it would be really great to have a sink rather than the bathroom sink. It'd be really great to have a nice counter. It'd be great to have the cooking, and oh my gosh, if you could actually put some ice cream or something in a refrigerator freezer, it'd be so much easier. And so it's a design question, right? If we put that out there, can we put it so that you can secure it? And then if you rent that beautiful picnic area, you can rent this little space and we'll give you access to it. That's a great option. There might be some elements as we get into the nitty gritty of the design that we go, you know what? It would be nice to put a farm sink out here that everybody could access if you just walked up to have a picnic, but maybe it's the refrigerator. I'm not going to say microwave, I'm mostly joking. And the microwave need to be covered. So I think that's a design piece, but absolutely there's got to be an eye to how do we secure it so that it doesn't become a vandal problem or an attractive nuisance, but still provides an attribute that the community can access if they want it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Because there's definitely history at that site that demonstrates that that could be a potential problem. On the building option number 2, why did we kind of analyze preserving the dining room area versus the bar, the other one? When I look at the picture, you had a rendering of the picture, from the garden area, and it almost looked like to me that if you were, let's see, that one, it almost looked like to me that if over to the right of that picture, which is where the bar area is, if you preserve that and then had kind of an open air underneath, straight to the tower and the other area, the rest of the people at that pavilion could enjoy kind of the look of the rest of the gardens that is currently masked in this rendering for the people who are in the open air pavilion part of it. Choice of one over the other, or does it matter? Something we can look at in the future?
I think the reason we kind of gravitated towards this volume as being the enclosed room is it's at the center of the composition of the building. It's attached to the tower. It's right there in the middle. And the idea of it being a jewel box being in the middle of everything with a garden patio on either side really just kind of, to us, felt like the natural place for it to be, as opposed to being off to the side.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then I had a kind of maybe a maintenance question also with, the decomposed granite. Once you put that in, I've seen decomposed granite over time requires a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of get some wear and tear, get some potholes in it, some ruts, things like that. There's some maintenance costs associated with that. Over time, is that still a better option than just doing asphalt up front, or is it more the issue of the aesthetics and the nature theme and the granite that we're kind of going with that option in the first place and we'll just suck it up, or is it?
Well, I think the landscape architect could speak better to the aesthetics, but I think there is the aesthetics concern that the DG is generally preferred from that. But from the maintenance, I think there's a trade-off, and in a flat site, I don't think that the maintenance of the decomposed granite is that much of a problem. If you get erosion, then it can be a much bigger problem. The trade-off is that you may not have to maintain the asphalt as much, but when you do, it's a lot more expensive, and it's going to be a lot less resilient to things like ground movement and things like that.
Okay.
So there's a balance, but I would tend to think on this site, in most of the applications we're looking at, the DG will be a more frequent but much less costly maintenance and overall probably the preferred alternative from maintenance.
Okay, all right, thank you, Robin. And Isabel, maybe this is for you on the play area. It just seems to me that in both the options for the park that it's like right there by the parking lot. It's right, near the road and things like that. I did see kind of a fence that might be in one of the options, but was there any consideration of maybe moving that to a different part of the park or further away? Or do we just have more problems when we get closer to the creek and parents watching and falling down the cliff kind of thing?
It's a great question. I think we did think about this and talk about it. I think for ease of access, we thought somewhere close to parking would be a good location for a play area. But that low fencing, and the fact that there's not huge volumes of there may be more activity, if there's a playground there. But I think, if it's something we take to the next level, that having the appropriate buffers and distance, it's hard at this scale because you're not seeing, too much detail, but it's definitely, balance again between putting it too far, but it's something you can give us direction on, and that there's no absolute need for it to be immediately adjacent to the parking area.
All right.
So it could be tucked in a little further.
Okay, and then probably a couple other park questions, and then I'm done. One was on there's the pump house down below, and there's a note on signage and things like that. But the water level got on that recent storm got right up to that pump house, and is that going to be renovated also, or will that be torn down and just a signage? Is that sort of the concept, or what do you see for that?
We talked about it on our site visit, but I think we were not really touching it in our concepts. I think, Kathy, you might have more feedback about what the plan is. I think not enhancing the access or not making it easy and having some kind of maybe a little split rail fence would probably be recommended, as opposed to encouraging people to, approach it if it's not going to be removed, which I don't know if that's a.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to editorialize slightly because I think it's a really interesting part of the history of the site, because that's how they were getting the water. Now, we wouldn't do that now. Let's just clarify. But because they did do that and they were getting water and it was servicing the restaurant, I think it's a part of that history. And so in a perfect world, yes, I would try and shore it up so that it doesn't move, and then interpret it with signage and an explanation from above that says, yeah, see, was the farm to table concept that they had, and very organic way of using what was there.
Okay. All right. And then the last question was really about that. As you're going down the trail down towards the creek and you've got that little meadow down there, there's a bench down there and everything. Is there any consideration given to enhancing that or improving that area as well, or just sort of leave it as is and the trail just sort of meanders by that?
I think we really loved that spot and thought it would be a great place to kind of create a new seating feature. And if you were to want to add the trail improvements, that it would come with a slight enhancement of that area, unless you wouldn't want to make kind of a big draw because there's erosion and it's kind of a sensitive area, but you could definitely have minor improvements to it to make it nicer once people get down to that bench.
All right, thank you, Isabel. That's all the questions I have, but before we go to public comment, I'd like to kind of open it up for any kind of cross-examination, if you will, for any follow-up questions.
Okay, go ahead.
It's probably a question for Paige and Turnbull about, are any of these buildings historic at this point?
The answer is no, they're not historic. They haven't been evaluated for historic significance. They're under the age, as far as I recall. So no, they're not historic. They're not on the register. They haven't been evaluated as such. You're welcome.
I'm not sure if I missed it, but as we talked about the pavilion, the kitchen, picnicking, I know we have some picnic spots in the park area. Are we contemplating picnic benches, tables, anything in and around the pavilion that actually supports the picnicking theme? Okay.
So at this point, this is kind of a big, high conceptual kind of
okay.
thing. And so as we eventually figure out what that big park shape would be, then we would be going into much more detailed design. So where you might have other benches along the paths, where you're going to have the tables under the pavilion. I think that is the concept, that you would have
Okay.
picnic tables there, picnic tables in other places, so that if it's not being rented or used, anybody could go in and enjoy it.
Thank you.
Anybody else on our side? Okay, the follow-up question I had was with regard to the DG versus the concrete perimeter pathway. Is there any thought to stability and usability for folks with disabilities and or seniors, and whether one option is better for that kind of accessibility?
Yes, and I would say that a paved path is preferable from
That's
an
what I was thinking.
accessibility standpoint, because even if you a paved surface, asphalt or concrete surfaces are just preferable for accessibility, wheelchairs and
Stability.
stability.
all
And
that kind of stuff.
yeah, because
Okay.
DG can have loose gravel
Right.
and
Okay.
you try really hard to stabilize it, but there may be a
Right.
little bit of movement there.
Okay,
So
thank you for answering that. I think we're good on our side.
Okay, any council members?
I have one question.
Okay.
I'll piggyback on Commissioner Osland question. Do we know like how far is this site is for historical landmark to be get like a historical landmark? Do we know that?
I know.
Like within next how many years?
Yeah, we researched the historical landmark and we can become, and I'm going to get the word wrong, but there is a California designation that we could get, but it's not the National Historic Landmark. We don't qualify for that by just their outside standards, but there is a California like significant place designation that we could get. And that would just be an internal thing the city would do.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, just a clarification of your clarification. If you do get a landmark status, then your ability to renovate and work with the property
It's
becomes
hard.
much more difficult, because you have to abide by the building techniques and materials of that time. So it becomes much more difficult to be flexible with the property.
So that's why we should renovate, then we should apply.
And it's only from 1979. We need all the historical, if that was the time enough. So yeah, it's not even close
But
to being.
2 years back, if I remember right, we were 8 years away from historical landmark, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But we need to check that one. It was around 2 years when we talked about this in the council. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a restaurant, it's not a store.
Yeah, and I have that giant binder and I could look it up because it's in there, but there's one, the historical, like the Forest Home Farms is on the National Historic Register. This site cannot do that. It just does not have the numbers, the years to do that. But you can apply to be like a location that the state of California will send you this little sign and you're designated, and then you can put it up. That's the kind of designation that this site can get, but that does not diminish its historical value to the city of San Ramon or its residents at all. So the question isn't whether we get a title that makes it so. The question is, how important is it to the community, and what do we need to keep, and what do we need to preserve, and what do we believe is inherent to our city's history?
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open public comment, and I'd like to ask clerk, do we have any speaker cards?
We do.
Okay,
Dawn Birnbaum.
okay. Come on up. Yeah, just a reminder for those with public comment, please keep your remarks to 3 minutes.
Good evening, council members and parks commissioners. I wrote out a statement that I was going to read to you, but I think I'm just going to talk off the top. I think the plan that you guys have put together and Kathy has put together is roughly right. Having been on the Parks Commission and been part of the group that put together the guiding elements, I think, you know, we've got the park in the right place. I think you guys need to talk through the details. And I've already seen you guys doing that. But I think that is what's appropriate for that park. And as many people have said, it is a unique park within our park system. I think that there has been a compromise with what Kathy and the group has put together. It incorporated many of the concepts that, you know, we were talked about with the park commissioners. And then it also included some of the comments that and desires of the city council. So I think we're roughly in the right place. I look forward to you guys, you know, hashing out the details tonight. And I'm hopeful to be a resident of the community when the park finally gets remodeled. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Next speaker, who would that be, Joan?
Country code 886 Taiwan.
Hi, everyone. I like the direction, but as I was listening to it, I was a little bit disappointed with some of the details. First of all, the major detail that is missing is what does the Parks Commission have in mind for this park? I didn't really hear that. It's in order to justify spending of millions of dollars, you have to have some sort of goal. Is it going to be something that is historical? I don't think so. Is it going to be revenue generating? I don't think so. So what is it? I'm not sure. That is something that the staff really have to answer to the taxpayers and the residents. I was disappointed, honestly, to the consultants. You guys really should have provided seismic evaluation. That area really deserves to have a report. So then the council can decide whether you want more structured building or should it be more open. If it's more open, because we have seismic risk, should it be affected by, you know, calamity, then it's less money for us to repair. Unfortunately, I don't know how much money we spent. The consultants failed to provide that. Really disappointing. Sounds like the flood affected up to where that little shack I saw last time. I highly recommend that area doesn't have any building or structures. I do recommend that the staff keep the residents posted on whether it is safe or not to be able to do some sort of like s'mores activity, like a beach activity where there's bonfire and the residents can apply and pay fees. So it is a controlled activity where people can enjoy, like, you know, marshmallows and snacks on a good weather day. Trails. If you're gonna have trails, I need to know, is that SRPD jurisdiction or is that East Bay Park all the way in Oakland? I don't want anything that is in Oakland. If it's a trail, I hope this will be an SRPD jurisdiction. Also, I would like to recommend, if it's possible, I would really like this area to be able to be a cheap wedding venue for people who are thinking of cowboys or Western themed wedding, where they can, you know, be a little bit more casual and still be able to afford a decent place to have their important day in life to be memorable and theme possible. Anyways, I think my time is almost up. Toxicity, if there is any toxicity, you guys have dropped the balls because there are people growing food. I just thought that it was a very interesting comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Rad. And Mr. Rad also provided written public comments, which are before you.
Good evening.
And just to reiterate, we did get the written comment.
Yeah.
Everyone has a copy of that, and there's a copy on the speaker's table in the back as well.
Thank
For
you.
the
So I believe we communicated via email with some of the council members and the mayor. So I'm the owner of the property that's right next to the park. I bought it in 2019. I've been looking at those structures for the last 4 years, pretty much. I love the property. I love my property. That's why I bought it. I love the neighboring property. I bought my property because it's close to nature. So I'm all for, the idea of the park, my main concern is that it's been 4 years. I'm bleeding here, right? I'm struggling. I lost both tenants in my building. I cannot bring anyone to look at the building to rent without them asking me what's going on here. Why is it like this? Why there's a chain link fence? Why does it have a tarp on it? So it gets to a point where I live in Ceramon. My business is in Ceramon. I'm gonna move my business into that building. But you really hope that okay, something's gonna get done. We're gonna move forward somewhere. And I'm hoping we're gonna have the money to accomplish what we want to do. So I'm hoping we don't let's say sign up for a $3 million project and then we have $200,000 in the bank. And then now I'm stuck looking at it again for another 10 years of my life. Because I'm doing an effort to keep my property clean, do everything I need to do. But you can do so much with, vegetation, the way it looks, you can't hide it. It's there pretty much. So my main hope, I have 2 comments, one about the project in general. And my hope is that, like I said, that we bite what we can chew. If we can only afford 500,000, then let's just work with 500,000. If we have $1 million, let's work with $1 million, not to overstretch ourselves. And if you do overstretch yourself, I hope you'll give priority to the buildings, demolish them, clean them, whatever needs to stay, and then make it kind of nice, where there is no more fence that's metal and it looks like a homeless encampment. Because people just drive by, they look at it, they have something they want to dump, they go, guess what? They dump it there. I called the city once, I called the city workers twice, but after a while, I just clean it myself. But it's not my job, right? I'm paying $44,000 in property tax every year on that building to go and clean people's whatever they want to go and throw over there. It just makes no sense anymore.
Michael, we welcome your comments, but please wrap.
Yeah, so that's regarding the speed that I want to see the project kind of move forward and then stay within a budget where the buildings are addressed. Now regarding the design, so there is a couple of comments I have. One of them is a sidewalk is needed towards the eastern.
I think we got that in your written comment.
Yeah. So that all the way, so people that are coming from Crow Canyon don't have to jump into my parking lot, and it's a 3-foot high wall. There's another sidewalk that's on Boardwalk Place that I think it needs to be addressed. That could be used. It's already there. It's dirt, and Boardwalk Place can be widened to 28 feet, I believe, and it could allow for people to park. And last is also,
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
Is mainly the parking spots, because one of the designs said that they want to reduce the parking spot, and I'm objecting against that, reducing the parking spot. And I provided what the parking easement pretty much between my property and the neighboring property.
Okay,
but that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
All right, thank you. And do we have any other speakers with speaker cards?
There are no more speaker cards. We do have hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, for Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 on your telephone. When it's your turn to talk, we'll call upon your name. And remarks will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Please wrap up in that time. The speaker's microphone will be muted once the allotted time has expired.
Jim Blickenstaff.
Go ahead, Jim.
Good evening. Very quickly, I just wanted to mention a couple things.
I think you as a body want to include the first choice that was listed by PlaceWorks of retaining the essential building. That was about 800,000. The price was somewhat moderate, but that's an important choice to retain as you mix and match and take the best features of various aspects of the park and the building. So let's keep that in the equation. Let's not rule it out tonight because of some recommendation from staff or PlaceWorks. Let's keep it in the equation because my sense of the community is they would love to retain the building because they also have a sense of history, whether it's been properly registered or not, is sort of secondary to the people's opinion of that building as San Ramon residents and how it's become a proud icon, for want of a better word, for something that was futuristic, that really brought in the environment into the business of a restaurant in a way that really more buildings should be doing. So it has a sense of value that demonstrates some of the best of San Ramon and our residents. And I think we do it an injustice if we turn it into an open air pavilion. That pretty much eliminates the historic value of a structure or even break it up. So let's keep that in the equation as a possibility to make it serve the community in a very somewhat passive way. And the park can be more active to some degree, relatively speaking, and not rule it out now. I think the public needs to be more involved. I think you need one or two more hearings where the public comes forward with a general sense of its value to them. And then you can make a more inclusive decision rather than maybe what I would consider somewhat premature tonight. Let's see. The final, like I said, the final decision needs to be after we are assessing the public's input. So let's keep them in the equation and let's keep our options on the table. So when we finally put this together, we have something of historic value. That's the option that the citizens can make. And then also a very valuable park. And so we can combine those two in a successful way. And with the building itself, you don't have to be 200 years old to be historic. It can be something that grows more historic virtually every day because of how unique it was and how San Ramon it was. But let's not rule that out tonight. And let's keep some of those options of retaining the essential building, including the full structure of the ceiling as a possibility. It doesn't mean you have to have it as a final decision, but let's keep it in the equation. Thank you.
Jim. Thank you. And who else do we have?
Deb Briggs.
Was it the name again?
Deb Briggs.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, awesome. I'm one of the volunteer gardeners that's been working for the last year and a half, trying to maintain what I think you refer to as the demonstration gardens on page 35 of your packet. I really appreciate seeing that at least right now, the plan is to maintain and enhance the demonstration garden. There are a number of us who are active with that garden. We care a lot about it. It means a lot to us as part of this community. There was also something about planting a new native garden. I would also like to support that. I think that would be a terrific addition to what's there right now. And then just briefly touching on Jim's point, the previous speaker, I also am a longtime San Ramon resident. I've been here 35 years. I remember having many wonderful meals at the Muds restaurant. If it were possible to save the restaurant, as much of it as would be feasible, that would be something that I would support. And I would second his request that we have additional public hearings. I'd like to hear from more people in San Ramon about, what that means to them, what we might be willing to do in order to try to save it, what might be feasible there. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
There are no more hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Then at this time, I'll close the public comment. And then what I'd like to do now is I'd like to kind of the same sequence we did before. We'll go through commissioner comments, and then council member comments. We'll kind of redirect as we need to for kind of a cross-examination of sorts, and then we'll wrap it up.
Can I first start by asking Kathy to address the last caller? Can you remind us to the extent that there was public feedback on this project that got us to this point? I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, there were, I think over 20 different meetings that happened in relationship to this property and what should happen with this building. There was a community-wide survey specific to this park and this area that garnered over 1,000 responses. So we've had a lot of public input on Crow Canyon Gardens and specifically the building at this point. So there has been a lot of outreach.
So now we're looking for feedback, correct?
Yeah, feedback, and if you got some favorite options or what kind of major muscle movements that you'd like to see here, or swapping things out.
Okay,
Yeah.
Flex my muscles here. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to mention that I served on the facilities committee and met many, many times to come up with our guiding principles for the park. And we shared our 3 recommendations with the Parks Commission, and all Parks Commissioners unanimously agreed with us around what our vision was for this space. Ultimately, the first recommendation was to adopt a vision for Crow Canyon Gardens that retains the peaceful atmosphere, serene environment, and emphasis on nature. And our whole discussion focused on that principle. We wanted to create space for people to come and enjoy the nature. When we reviewed all the buildings, they were completely falling apart. Roofs are caving in. Things are really in dire disrepair. And this has been going on for a very long time. It's been in our community for quite some time. So we have talked a lot about this, and the commissioners did agree unanimously when we presented our findings that they agreed with our plan. And so that's what brings us here today. What I like and what I think we need is ADA access to the creek. I think that's important part of this plan. How that's done, I have no idea, but I think that that's a really important element that needs to be seriously looked at. I want more garden plots. Definitely, we need those. There is a high demand. The weather and the conditions in that area of San Ramon really support gardening. And in the middle of spring and summer, those gardens are packed with incredible vegetables and plants. I think that there's a real need to increase those. So I liked the option with more garden plots. Shade structure for the gardeners. I really like that attribute. I think that is missing now, an area for the gardeners to sit. It can have perhaps kiosk for information, but I thought that that was a lovely attribute and element added. Reusing any materials that we can, the pavers, anything within the building that can be retained, the stained glass. I think that that is our highest priority, to really do that when we can. Maintaining the natural setting is a must, and I don't want it overcluttered at all. I think it needs to be very clean and lean, and really emphasis on the nature there. I'm somewhat mixed about the walkways. I think that we should consider a mixture of the two. I don't know. I've heard cement and I've heard asphalt brought up. I didn't ask that what the material would be for the paved, but I also like using some of the DG material throughout where it's feasible. But I think that we have to make this ADA accessible for all ages and for strollers too. The other thing that I think is the open air pavilion. I love that. I love the idea of maintaining the roof and having that available as a shade structure. I was a little confused if that was an option, but I'm very clear now that that looks like that is an option in all the drawings. I love the circulation of option B, where you have a path that takes you kind of in the middle. I liked option B over A. And I also believe we need a permanent restroom. I think that's a really important attribute. The other thing that was a little bit concerning was the parking. I think that we need to keep the parking on Parkside. I know that that will carve in a little bit into the park, but I think having just a drop off is not good enough, especially because the gardeners will have a long walk if they have to park in the parking lot that would be over where the fireside room, the larger parking lot. So I recommend that we consider keeping some parking there on Parkside. Let's see, what else did I write down? Yes, we need an outdoor kitchen. I'm loving the ideas. I had questions as well as how that would be secured. I think that probably there are a lot of options around that. I think that we need to have a small kitchen and a small refrigerator that can be locked up. I think low lighting, that's, I know this is probably getting more into the weeds, but I think low lighting would be beneficial, not bright lights. And then let's see here. Yeah, utilizing the building elements in the design throughout the pavilion. So the ceiling, the stained glass, using opportunities to share some stories about the Muds restaurant and the history that it brings to San Ramon. What I don't think we need is the jewel room. It's small. I heard maybe some benefits that you could store some stuff in there. You might be able to have some classes, but I think that the cost of it and the management and the maintenance outweigh the benefit. Let's see. I think my other concern about the jewel room is, do we have staff that's going to be at that site, or does staff have to go over to manage the room? So those were some of the concerns. What I'd like to see modified. Okay, I talked about the parking. I like the larger parking. I think that one of the options had leaving the trees and the other had taking out the trees. I'm not sure which was which because I'm not looking at the drawing, but I would recommend that we have more spots that are, far enough away from the scour and the sliding that's going on. Because I think we're going to have, the park will be filled during the day. People are going to come if it's cleaned up. And then about the kitchen, I think we only need one kitchen. I don't think we need any more than that. The concerns that I have are, what's the overall operating cost of the park? And with the jewel box being there, what are the planned uses for that? I'm not clear, again, that there's a benefit to having that. Classes, weddings, I don't know. When we had our facilities committee meetings to discuss this, we really felt that, if a wedding took place there, it would need to be very small. So this isn't a venue for large weddings. We have that also we have a space in the city of San Ramon at our community center in the Rose Garden, and our large community room for weddings. And I appreciate Mr. Rad's comments. My concerns as well is the timeline. I mean, we've been looking at this space for a long time, and the longer we wait and the longer the property sits, the more vandalism is taking place, the more disarray and decay and disruption the building is having and the park. So we need to decide on what our timeline is here and make some decisions around that. And the funding, how we're going to pay for this. I think it all depends on what we come up with all these attributes, but we need to get funding secured and so that we all feel comfortable moving forward. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that we started with three main concept that's I can remember since I joined is a natural setting, connect with the landscape environment and adjacent creek, and maintain the serene environments where residents can connect to that. So first of all, I would like to congratulate the designers, planners to try to keep that as much as possible with an existing, it's not a greenfield. We already have something to work with. So first of all, we do that. Some of my comments will probably overlap with Commissioner Osborne because I'm also looking at the same thing. Parking space. I'm still coming back on that. Rather than reducing, I think we need to think about at least keep what we have, if not more. And if we can have some of the parking spaces on the other side, because I like what Commissioner Oslan said that, if we look at the whole layout, if I have my garden bed on one side, there's a long walk, back and forth walk on that one. So if we are thinking of increasing, if there is any possibility on the other side, will be a better. About don't want to take too much time, but about two of the options, I would like the open pavilion because I also don't see much benefit of the jewel room. Although we know that there are a lot of discussion happen on keeping a jewel room, but the way that is presented right now, I don't know if how much benefit we'll get out of that. Revenue aside, again, keeping it open, keeping it free for people moving around, doing that. I think that open space pavilion is actually like that. About the garden space, we talked about that. Again, garden space, looking at the cost and second option. Again, at the same time, coming back to how long are we going to plan for this one? When are we going to start working and finishing this? We heard from the neighbor, they wanted to finish it done. We want to get it done. So what can we do? I know that we talked about finishing it in phases, some like on that, but can we get going on that? So my choices on the park option A and B, I think I would prefer the option B, A here on that, because it's more simple way and also cheaper on that one. Funding, we should definitely look into this, but funding wise, whatever we can get it done sooner, I would prefer that one. About the seismic, I think there was a comment on seismic. We are on the seismic zone. So if we are thinking of something, we should definitely look into the seismic effects and what can we do on that if the structure is seismically protected or not. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. I too was on the facilities committee on the parks and commissions. As I'm not going to repeat what Commissioner Osland said, because we've given it a lot of time on that. And so my theory is that also I'm for not having the jewel room, because we discussed that we want to keep it serene and simple and nature. And so I think I like the open air when we have the open air, so that we will have shade. And I think if we keep it simple, and I just don't think that keeping a building would be, it is not nature in itself as the building. But if we do it as you have in the building 1 and 2, there's a lot of things that could crisscross. I think the room in the middle probably is where you were doing that. that would work so that you get shade, so that we have open space, a lot of shade. I don't think what we had said in our facilities and investigated this, that we didn't need meeting rooms because we have lots of meeting rooms that other things can take place. And it's small. I don't think it would be beneficial that most everything can be done outside, especially if you have lots of shade area. Kind of mixed on the decomposed and the concrete. Perhaps some of them could be concrete, some of them could be decomposed, but I see the differences. So that's kind of whatever. The parking does seem like a problem because like if you are gardening, you do, as they have said, you don't want to walk that far because you're usually hauling things with you, and that's an inconvenience. So trees and all for the shades throughout we discussed, and we also discussed the play areas that would be strictly of nature, and that we do need picnic areas throughout the facility because then you can go. But the people that I've come in contact with, some don't even realize it was a restaurant before. So I think everyone that I've talked to is the park itself so that it can be used in a way that is simple. And I do have, this has been going on for 3 years. And so I'm very anxious to see that it moves along now, and it's going to be expensive either way, but we need to do something because, as the gentleman said, it is a really eyesore now, and people around the area that live there that I've spoke with have said that they really want to see something done. So I think, that we can make some options of trading some issues from one to the other options, that we can make this work, but that we need to keep it simple and serene and close to nature and move forward on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Alcantara.
Thank you. And I'll try not to overlap too much, but there are going to be a couple of common themes. One is I really do think we need to take a phased approach, assuming we don't have all the money and we don't have a time turner, that we can do everything at once. So I feel strongly as well that the building needs to be addressed, the demolition or the reconstitution needs to be addressed as a high priority. It is an eyesore. It's dangerous. I think of it as the broken window theory. When we went out and toured, there was a sofa and a chair and a bunch of things down at the creek. And I think that when you have things not maintained or in that kind of state, it does beget more. So if I were to prioritize, I would prioritize addressing the building first, I think. I would probably second address the park and gardens, and I'll get to some specifics. Third would be the creek. For me, I think the creek is important, but I don't know if it is as high a priority as the others. And I think that there may be some room to add that on, because I think in any event, we're not talking about making significant changes to it. Fourth, I see the parking situation potentially as an evolving issue, given the situation on the ground. As to some specifics, I think the shade structure in the garden/park area would be really, really important. We've seen the heat in the summers get more and more intense, and I think that's really important. And having something more adjacent to the meadow and the gardens and the park area is really a key thing I would like to have. I'm really glad Commissioner Oslin mentioned this, because as we're talking about the history of MUDs and the philosophy and the natural aspect, I think every chance we get to repurpose existing materials, and that is for the experts, I think we should take it. If the bar is something we can repurpose for some purpose and it's something useful, turn it into a bench. I don't know what. I haven't actually seen that physical piece, but I would love to see us reclaim and repurpose everything within reason. And if there's a story to tell, let's highlight that. And if the story is that we've recaptured and repurposed many items throughout the park in order to, continue that idea of what MUDs was all about, the remembrance. And I wasn't around very much. I never got to go there, so I don't have that connection in history, but it resonates with me with many of what you were talking about. The jewel box is really interesting to me. I'm not ready to let it go, although I'm one person. I understand the perspectives of the others, but when I again hear the history of MUDs and what's gone on here, the gardens, the farm to table concept, the orchards, I have this vision, and I'm not sure it's practical. I would love to see potentially a demonstration kitchen where, you know, people can come out and do cooking classes or demonstrate, you know, using some of the items in the garden or sourced through there. I can envision that being a space where either there is a cooking class inside the building or thinking about bringing classrooms of kids, much like we do the one-room schoolhouse, and others out there to come out and have a place for the kids to get some lesson, again, thinking about heat and weather conditions, and then be able to turn around and take them out of doors. If it's going to turn into a storage place, no. If it's staging for a class, as you bring materials in and out for the outdoor classes in the summers, and the room is still somewhat functional, then yeah, I like the idea. So I think there's value to it. I don't know how much additional cost that specific item adds to it. So I can't say I would take this over that. It does occur to me, though, that if we do use it, we may want to put an actual, say, refrigerator in there. And if people are renting that outdoor kitchen space, yes, it's handy to have the little refrigerator, but they might actually like to have, if they're planning an event or a picnic or something, they might use that, but I don't know how that might work. So just something to think about. I do really like the idea of retaining the open aspect of the pavilion as much as possible. And I don't remember which council member may have brought it up, but I'd be very curious to see a rendering of preserving perhaps the bar area instead of the dining room. And that way you have, when I look at the current rendering of it, you have kind of a three-sided, a larger opportunity to be part of the garden if you move the building kind of to the right instead of in the center where I think you block a big portion of it. So I'd like to see that if we're retaining that, or before we make the decision to get rid of it. There is value as a parent of used to be young kids, but no longer young, in having the play area somewhat accessible to the parking lot. Because if we're envisioning younger kids, they need to go get their diapers and snacks and things. And so having it somewhat parking adjacent, I think there's value to that. The one thing that I'm struggling with is I love the large meadow. I love the idea of picnicking on the ground in the large meadow and kids running around and people enjoying that, and somebody's out playing a guitar, maybe, I don't know. But when we potentially with the parking and the nature area and stuff, so we start to cut it up. I love the middle path because I think it makes the middle of the space accessible, but it also cuts the meadow. So I almost like the idea of keeping the path, but putting the meadow still on both sides, and potentially considering keeping the play area where you had it in option B rather than A, or potentially relocating the play area to be parking adjacent to the other parking lot where you're looking at the new gardens or something like that as an option. Again, not the expert, just a thought. We absolutely need a permanent restroom. It's unclear to me whether we're contemplating a restroom in the area near the building / pavilion as well as the park area, or just one. But that would be something. I, of course, always want my refilling water stations. And I think those are largely my comments. I do like the idea of the decomposed granite, the pavers or the stone. And I think it would be interesting to see if maybe we could incorporate all three elements into the design so that there is some ADA fully accessible areas, but maybe it's not all perfect, but they can get at least around the whole park very easily. But maybe some of the interior spots where there would be less travel required might be worth using some of the other surfaces. So some combination, perhaps. I'd hate to have the whole thing look like pavement. And if concrete would be a little better, but yeah, so I think that's it. Thank you.
My turn? All right, thank you very much. I just wanted to address a couple things. I'll start with the highlights. I like the open pavilion, option one. I like option B on the park. So that's pretty simple, I think. ADA accessibility is a paramount consideration because we do want to be inclusive in the creation of a park setting like this. It needs to be natural. That's why the open, inviting, pavilion is, just perfect for it. We could even put some roll down, shades, if the weather gets a little inclement, and those work perfectly well. I also want to comment on the fact that this is probably one of the most discussed, projects over the last several years, maybe 5 or 6 years. And it's one of the few that we've had a private citizens assessment as well as a public assessment and contractual assessment by other professionals. So I think it's been vetted quite sufficiently going forward. So it is time to make a decision and to move forward. I would err on the side of park versus parking. I think we can mitigate the parking as we see the use of the facility. We can't stop nature if the parking area is falling down the creek. We can shift it onto the street, as Council Member Perkins had said. But we also have to remember that if it's a recreational area, there are usually more than one person coming. This isn't like commute time. It's usually more than one person, maybe 2, 3, 4 coming in a car. So we can't look at an individual space as, facilitating, one person. You're going to see 2 or 3 people in most cases when you go to a park. But I also just wanted to, make the comment that it is an open, natural, passive area. And I think that's really where we want to take a look at how we keep that feeling, that environment, and that vision going forward. If I could comment on one point of public comment, the toxicity that we were speaking about was in the building site, which is nowhere near the gardens. So it's just specifically that really bounded area where the building is, which is a very small percentage of the park. But because of the age of the building, you need to be careful of what materials were used in that time frame, and that's the reason I brought that up. But it doesn't affect the gardens, and it has never affected the gardens because they're quite a distance away. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so just a couple of things for me, because there are certain themes that you're going to hear from the commission because we are a like mind in many ways, I can tell. But to the team, to Kathy and the team, I really want to say great job on processing all of the feedback that you've received to date. Not an easy task because it is a very sensitive issue, frankly. And I do feel like the options that you presented reflect, and I feel successfully blend the master plan intention, as well as the commission and the council and the resident feedback. So I really feel like that was a tough job, and I know you guys put a lot of effort into it. So I think it's important to know that we appreciate that. I'm especially pleased to see that the approach respects the need to preserve the natural space, because as you've heard from many of us, it was really important, and it is in fact part of the charter of the master plan. One of our guiding principles is to preserve the natural space, to bring our residents closer to nature. So I feel like your options, while a nod to MUDs, they get us there. So I think that's really good. My previous considerations and comments regarding the gardens have really surrounded adhering to the master plan goals of preserving the natural space, also considering the fact that we have so many city facilities that are underutilized. And so that's why I wanted for us to really temper building preservation, which is very costly because we have underutilized facilities. We want to utilize those. And those facilities are costly. We want to look at the costs of the project in light of the fact that we have an aging park system. We have more parks than any community I know. Those parks continue to age, and they require money to maintain them at a level that this community requires and expects, and that we all take pride in, frankly. We have 2 new parks coming online in the west side. We have BR6 that, although it will be built by Sunset Development, it will be dedicated to the city and we will be required to maintain it. These things involve costs. And as we look at any project, we need to keep that in mind. We cannot operate in a vacuum. We have to look at this from a holistic approach, and that's really critical. So I think that's really important. So I was actually surprised to see the relative costs between total demolition and building options A and B. It wasn't so drastic that I was like, oh, absolutely just demolish everything and get rid of any, building evidence, right? So I haven't ruled out the jewel box. I get what my colleagues are saying because we want to keep it natural. I wonder if an option might be, and I don't really want to drag this on, but I wonder if an option might be to ask staff to explore and flesh out what the jewel box usage might look like, what the cost might be, and what the revenue possibilities are. Because I feel like it's, some folks have passion around celebrating and honoring the heritage of MUDs. This would allow us to do that in a scaled back fashion if we could justify the building's usage, right? Because I am sensitive to cost. So I'm just throwing it out there as an option to maybe come back to us with more details on what that looks like and what those costs and benefits look like. So with relatively similar costs between demolition and options in 1 and 2, I can get on board with a scaled back building preservation plan. Particularly option 2 sounds like an option to me. There wasn't that big a cost differential between 1 and 2. And there were some interesting elements in the second option. I like that it helps us honor MUDs and San Ramon's role in the farm to table movement, especially if that building can be shown to generate some revenue not to offset the maintenance and operation costs and serve that functional purpose. I'm also supportive of a modified version of park option B. I do feel like we need to get parking closer to the gardeners. I think I think we've heard that a couple of times. I think that's very valid. Also, as an aside, I am highly supportive of more garden plots. I forget which council member suggested that we've got some high density housing going into our city core. These are folks that maybe it was you, Kathy. Maybe these are folks that will not have gardens and yards per se. They are going to need outlets to get out into nature and to garden and do those kinds of fun things. That's part of how we help foster mental health and balance in our community. Adding 20 more spots will definitely not meet the need, but it's a step in the right direction in my perspective. A couple of final items. I do feel like if we hang on to the jewel box and even with the pavilion, we need to make sure that we define allowed uses. So is it weddings? What are the things that we can have there, particularly as it impacts noise, particularly the hours of operation, particularly as it impacts parking and also our staff time, as we've mentioned. So that's important. Let's see, regarding the GG and the concrete, maybe it is a balance and a combination of them, but I feel like, as was mentioned before, ADA accessibility is critical. I think that's a common theme here. And also, one of our goals for creating passive spaces, natural spaces, is for our seniors to be able to enjoy them. But if they can't get around safely, then we have, countered that objective. And I feel like safety is always tops on our minds. So I guess as a final note, I would say, let's just make sure that this project does not jeopardize the maintenance of existing and upcoming parks and other projects, such as, so one example is, we look at things, we're forward thinking, we look at things like the heavily researched by our staff, the prospective San Ramon Community Light Parade, which has tremendous potential for bringing our community together. And as Commissioner Ellicott-Pesic likes to say, building those connections. So I think we need to ask ourselves, what are we trading off for what we do here? Does it mean a park doesn't get maintained at the level that it should be? Does it mean that we can't do something that has a potential to bring all sides of San Ramon together? So I think those are the things that I think about when I look at costs. But again, just to bring it full circle, I do feel like you guys have gotten us further down the road, and I really appreciate that. I think there's great potential here, and I'm really excited to get the ball rolling. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you, Chair Kennison Lee and Commissioners. I'm actually going to start at the other end and work back this way. And let me start with Councilmember Burrows.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Armstrong. Well, it's great to hear a lot of feedback from commissioners. We always tell, at least in my place, we tell our kids to eat organic food, healthy food, and we tell ourselves about it. So this is not in another restaurant. This place is revolution start of the food. This place is where the organic food revolution started, farm to food, farm to table, the concept started. There is a lot of significance in this. That's the reason why we call it as our heritage. We should be very proud that in San Ramon, this whole revolution started. And we need to celebrate it. We need to share this with our kids, our next generation. This is not some another restaurant. We need to understand that. And to preserve this and to share this, we need to have the structure. So this is a unique opportunity for us to save this unique, iconic building. With that in mind, yes, we do have some concerns about the cost expenditure that we need to preserve it, how we are going to maintain it. But please, I suggest highly that don't wrap yourself into or box yourself thinking that, oh, cost and revenue is the only thing that will keep us moving forward. No, vision is what we need. There are very few things in San Ramon where we can tell proudly that these are our landmarks, our historical points, or any revolution or something unique, right? This is one of their place. It's very significant. So with that keeping in my mind and with my thought process, I would definitely like to see building option 2 with open air and enclosed room. I definitely want to see retaining long axle dining room ceiling, especially with the, what is that? We just want to make sure that the ceiling, the cedar ceiling is a must to have. I definitely want to make sure that is there. And also retain the tower ceiling. I like that. Retain enclosed dining, jewel box. That is very important. And yeah, so as we cannot keep everything that we want to, I really wish we can do a lot more than that. But otherwise, I think the building option 2 sounds pretty good. We are in Middle Road where we can preserve our heritage. At the same time, we can celebrate at that location with our kids and our youth. Pretty much, I'm really visioning that every school student will visit there and celebrate what it means eating healthy food. I want to see that. That's my vision on this. And coming to the parks option, it's fantastic ideas. Thank you very much for putting together a whole plan for that. On this one, I would go with park option B. Especially, I like this ADA accessible creek trail. I want to see everyone should be able to go down that creek. I don't know how many of you went there, but it is fantastic. It's like you once you get into that creek, it's like you just came out of an urban area. I know we are suburb, but still you feel you are in middle of some total nature. So we need to make sure that should be enjoyed by everyone in the community. And also I like that outdoor kitchen, but once again, one of the commissioner mentioned that we need to make sure how we can secure it so that it is not being vandalized. And also I like the meadows, at the same time, the parking. We need to have that parking. Again, I agree with commissioners' comment about why we need to have that so that the gardeners as well as some of the young kid moms who want to just drop and then play with the kids. That's very important for us. So that's the reason I want to go with the park option B. And yeah, that's pretty much. Thank you once again for all your work. I know staff you have been working on this for years, and at one point, council really almost split on this voting, and we came with an idea that we need to preserve this with a vision, not boxing ourselves that this is something one kind of restaurant or one kind of revenue generator. No, this is our community property. Let's preserve it. Let's celebrate our heritage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Rubio.
Thank you. I certainly echo the sentiments of Councilmember Veros. Once it's gone, it's gone. So it's kind of like, I call it like getting a haircut. Better be conservative, don't chop off too much. You can always take away later more if you want to. So one of the things that I think in terms of Jewel Box Room, I envision that we could do there is definitely have some little mementos or storytelling of the history of San Ramon in that area. And along the walls or something like that, The other thing is that space can certainly be used to create a next generation of young people who will really appreciate nature and that organic, farming type of like local farming, learn how to do that, get their hands in there and do it, learn it firsthand. So that room can certainly be an area where they can learn. Adjacent to that, I think would be really nice if we actually have a children's garden, a dedicated children's garden where they can actually work and do projects themselves there. And I definitely agree. I think we need an ADA accessible path through the pass-through as well as to the creek. And that can be done, obviously, by making sure to create a winding path that will abate some of the decline incline so that they can still get access. And obviously, I second what has been said about securing the outdoor kitchen, the Jewel Box Room as well. I actually was looking at the option B for the park and talking about the parking, and I don't know how to show it to you, but based on the way it's laid out on the image here, it's basically like there seems to be like one orchard where the new parking would be on Park Place. You see there's like one orchard, or it looks like a small orchard. It's on page 2.1A. Oh, 32, excuse me. That's right.
That's option B.
It's option B, correct. I don't know if I can step over there and show him, can I?
Can you flip that, Joan? Can you put this up just to make it easier? So you're trying to point out, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I don't know if I can show you guys, but can I walk over?
You can, or just tell me what you're.
Okay, so if you look at the sorry. So if you look at where we have the new parking, right, on Park Place.
Yes.
Okay, if you go in the direction of that one orchard, that smaller one right there in that area, right?
Right in front of it's nature play in front of the parking on Park Place, or you're talking about the picnic area?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Okay, we need power. So if you see where the parking place is here, if you go this way a little bit, there's one orchard. It seems like there's a tree there.
Oh, I see what you're talking about
Right.
now.
If we are able to relocate that somehow to another part of the park and open up that space right there, we could add additional parking right there, right next to the garden. And then therein, in between this picnic area and the garden right here,
Now I understand what you're saying.
you
Yes.
could create another direct path to the garden area.
I see. Okay.
So they wouldn't have to even, they'd have a very dedicated path straight to the garden.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying what you were talking about. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
absolutely. And so, okay, so that is that part. 1 second. All right, okay, so going back to options now, overall, I absolutely, in terms of the building, I very much prefer option 2. With the amendment of retaining the bar room ceiling and counter as mentioned, to retain a little bit more of the feel, the original space of the original space. And you can use that as part of the outdoor kitchen if you like, or however you see fit. I do think, as I mentioned, keeping the jewel box has many purposes, as the list previously mentioned. So that's why I would like to go with option 2 on that. In terms of the park, I am definitely in favor of the option B, especially because of the accessibility, increased accessibility. That one, I wouldn't really amend anything other than just the comments I made about how we can increase parking and the additional path that would go directly to the garden. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Perkins.
Yeah, so as one of the members who's been hearing this for quite a few years, like some of the others here, like Will and Carol and Julia. Yeah, this isn't the first hearing. This isn't the second or even the third. Contrary to what some of the earlier speakers said, and getting community input, we've been getting community input for 5 years or more on this. So this isn't the first one. But one of the key themes that came out of the survey, came out of the facilities committee, that came out of the commission, and came out of the council was quiet, serene, peaceful, natural setting. That was the overriding theme of all of this. And with regards to that, I think it was a consensus that we never have amplified voice or music, and that we restrict the kinds of activities that are allowed. And I would limit the amount of available lighting so that we can limit this to dawn to dusk activities. That if you don't have a lot of lighting, you don't encourage late night activities in the area. And for the most part, I don't see a need for having a substantial amount of lighting here. So along with those things, so keep with the survey, the commission, the council theme of quiet, serene, peaceful, natural setting. No amplified music, and operations limited to dawn to dusk. I believe one kitchen is only needed. Now, in some of these, forms, we had a kitchen it says outdoor kitchen with sink, barbecue, and refrigerator over here in options 1 and 2. And then park option B had another outdoor kitchen. I believe that only one is needed. And so wherever it belongs, but I don't think we need to. In option A, we had concrete paved primary pathways and decomposed granite perimeter path. And I think that's a good compromise on the accessibility and the pathways, that the heavily used primary pathways would be concrete, as in option A with the pathways. When we do, this may be getting way down to the weeds, literally, additional water bibs for the community garden. When I've been out there, and Kathy's smiling because she's probably heard that before from the gardeners. If there's more than 2 or 3 gardeners out there, I don't want to say they're fighting over but they're saying, I get it next. I get it next. No, it's my turn next. Water bibs are at a premium out there. So figure out a way to have more water bibs installed out there. I don't think that's a big deal, but I do like the community garden shade structure, which is part of option B. I do like the ADA accessible creek trail. When we mentioned it, only taking it down to there's kind of a plateau. And then you go down again to the creek. The creek can be low or it can be high. And the problem with taking it all the way down to the creek might be it's subject to some severe erosion and destruction. And I'm not sure that it's going to be possible to maintain a path, an ADA path that goes all the way down to the creek. As much as we would like it to, Mother Nature sometimes fights back, as we've seen with the parking lot and the creek erosion. How much was the cost to mitigate? It was in the tens of millions, wasn't it? Yeah, it was in the tens of millions to keep the creek from eroding further back. So I'm not sure that the cost associated with taking an ADA path all the way down to the creek is a wise investment. Simply because the next New Year's Eve storm will take it out. And we'll be frustrated by that. I'm not sold one way or the other on the jewel box. I see value, but I also see costs. And so I'm gonna leave that argument to others that feel more passionate about that. Let's see, I had some other notes here. Oh, more plots. I think that was a common theme here, that trying to squeeze in as many new community garden beds as possible, I think really adds value. And to be honest, I kind of like the parking along Park Place with option A, even though I like option B, Park, better. That adds, I know it eats up a little bit of park there, but adding an extra, 10 spaces right there along Park Place, I think adds value. And so because the community gardens, the people that use the community gardens aren't going to want to park to the east of the restaurant. They're going to want to park right off Park Place. And so I like the additional parking there. The nature play area, I really like that. I really like that log thing for kids to climb on, particularly if it's got, the right kind of a landing zone material. And we've got the right kind of landing zone material elsewhere. Just having a sturdy enough barrier to keep little ones from running into the street area. But we're good at that too. So I'm not too worried. But the picnic areas, the nature play areas, the meadow, you guys have done a fabulous job. Both the architects and the site planners, you really have. And I really appreciate all the work you've done. But I think one of the keys to making this the most interesting and usable place is the kind of the limitations on what we allow, as well as what we encourage.
Yep.
There are going to be lots of things we want to encourage, nature oriented and maybe cooking oriented, but we want to discourage loud, noisy activities that are not compatible with quiet, serene, peaceful, natural setting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'll just add my comments. Most of what I've felt tonight, we've already heard, but I'll just reiterate a couple things. First of all, good job in capturing the commission's, prior thoughts and guidance, as well as the council's guidance. We went back and forth on this several times, had made a decision. We had a reconsideration. We pushed it to policy. We came back with a dual option for council to consider, and that's kind of what we ended up with from a council perspective. So kind of respecting that, let me just also say that I think you captured it well in the what you call the guiding elements there in the staff packet, and some of this has been hit on, but I'm just going to read it. Retaining a peaceful atmosphere, serene environment, and emphasis on nature has been said a couple times. But also the part, as Councilmember Perkins mentioned, allowing for future classes, small events and programs at Crow Canyon Gardens that should be focused on nature and the natural world and be kept at low levels as determined by the Parks and Community Services Department to ensure that the peaceful and serene environment is maintained. I think you have captured that in the options that you presented and kind of respected kind of where we were going from both a commission and a council perspective on it. The other thing I like is that, you know, it kind of reflect back on the parks master plan. I mean, you're hitting on all four cylinders here of the four guiding principles that you have of, you know, the interconnectedness, the conservation of a connection to nature, inclusive, balanced quality and quantity. That was something that was a little concern to me up front, was the balance of quality and quantity. I mean, as mentioned here already, we have so many parks and this is not easy to maintain. They're beautiful parks. It's kind of a signature thing about our city. But whatever we come up with has got to be manageable. It's got to be feasible now, but it's also got to be manageable deep into the future. And you know, we may have some current fiscal constraints right now. The future out years may be a little bit brighter. But we got to make sure we can keep this going, whatever option we come up with. So having said that, and then taking a look at, I think you mentioned it, Chair Councilman Lee, the cost differentials were not that significant between, you know, the different options presented. I mean, it depends upon whose money you're talking about, but you know, when I'm talking about not significant, okay, and when you're talking in the millions, but the difference might be maybe a $500,000 over $3 to $4 or $5 million. That's less of an issue. So, having said that, that there may be just an incremental difference in cost. I've changed my I'm changing my position a little bit out of respect for a council decision that's already been made and trying to be consistent with that council prior decision. But I would go with the option 2 for the building. However, so I know there's some size and maybe some surprise on that. But I would, as suggested earlier, maybe look at using the bar option, the bar building being the jewel as opposed to that dining room in the middle. I can go either way on it, but I think there might be some worth exploring what that might look like, and as we go forward, and it comes back to the commission to consider in the future. And then with respect to the park, I also went kind of on the little bigger option for that too, with option B. In particular, I like the ADA access down to the creek or down to that area. We may be limited on how far we can take that, but I do like the ADA access there. ADA accessibility all the way around the perimeter, as shown in really in both the options. But I also like in option B that you had an ADA drop-off point, parking lot closer to where the open air pavilion area and the jewel box is. That was a little bit of a nuance there, but I like that to where it gives those who may need that additional access a place to park and a little shorter distance to get into that pavilion area, as well as to the jewel box area as well for those low level classes. In terms of other things, I think you know, all the options really had the kitchen, the expansion of the gardens, the play area, that sort of thing. We didn't really talk much about benches around the perimeter, but as we have young families with kids and strollers, seniors with a walker, or just needing a rest, maybe we need to take a look at the benches around that perimeter as they're kind of strolling around there, in case they need a little bit of a rest. I would, I guess maybe the final comment might be just with respect to getting it done, right? The phasing idea that was mentioned earlier. To me, time is money here, right? So the longer we delay, and we've been delaying this for years, the more costly it's going to get. So I think we need to kind of move out fairly smartly on this and try to take some action as soon as possible. If I had to kind of prioritize, I'd probably do it. I think Commissioner Ellicott Pesek kind of was thinking like me in this regard, but probably working the building piece first. That's also got it's sort of the long-term eyesore. Get that thing fixed up, and then work the park in general, and then the trail down to the creek. Some of this may be able to be done concurrently, but if we had to sequence it in and phase it in, I'd probably go in that order as sort of my preference. So again, option 2 for the building with maybe a relook at the bar versus dining room, and then option B for the park, kind of the go big option on that, given the not that significant difference in the funding levels on all these options. So that's my initial thoughts. And now at this point, we've all kind of had a chance to say what we want to say and hear what everybody else has to say. I'd like to open it up for any crosstalk here on some of the other things we've heard, or maybe you just didn't get some out on the table that you want to say now, because they're going to run with us whatever we go with at this point.
So that's gonna be my question. Are we gonna make a direct recommendation to staff on how to move forward? Or are we gonna kick this down the road for one more or 2 more meetings?
So my expectation for this meeting was for Kathy and staff to hear what we all had to say. And at some point here in a second, she's going to kind of read back what she's got. But I did not intend to come up with a motion or second and a vote on option A or B or 1 or 2, but just kind of hear it out. And there may be some consistent themes that have been coming out here and that they're going to run with, and then it'll come back for commission kind of final evaluation and
Okay.
Well, I think it has to. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's at least my thought.
Back to the
But-
commission, and then we might have an opportunity at that point to give any glaring feedback, right? And then it goes to the city council.
So just for clarity, because I think this will help everyone. So what we're looking for today is the feedback, which I think I've got. I think I can repeat it back to you when you're all done talking, unless something changes. And then if we're there, then PlaceWorks will go back and they will design the actual park master plan, and then that park master plan using this feedback. So I'm using this the way you're saying it. We'll go to the Parks Commission and then we'll go through its normal park process as we would normally do with any park in San Ramon. It does not go back to the city council at that point. It stays with the Parks Commission to finish it off. But it's essential that we at least got the groups together and made sure we had the vision correct before we send PlaceWorks to create a master plan that is not something that we want to see.
Can I just one thing, which I think is clear, but I just want to make sure, what I would love to see is when you come back to give us something executable. And if that means we can't afford it to do everything all at once or to proceed all at once, that we have the option to do in phases. If you do come back with different options with the rendering of the jewel box, that we can have them ready to, again, make a decision and execute. And if we don't have everything, but we can get moving on a phase, it seems like we're overdue. I don't know if that's possible to break it into that, assuming we don't have the resources and the funding to do it all at once.
I think to put all your minds at ease, I'm 100% certain that phasing is the direction that this project will probably need to take. And so that is something that we would need to phase it in based on the funds available and what we can do and how to do it. So.
Okay.
This side have any additional comments?
Okay, Councilmember Rubio.
Thank you. So based on that knowledge, obviously, maybe what makes sense is us starting with where there's agreement, right? Starting somewhere where there's agreement and then kind of refining the other areas that might not be so clear. Right?
I think I have some of those notes that as soon as you're done with any other, I can dive in there if you would like me to, Vice Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? Dive in.
All right, so what I think I heard, and I've got all these lovely check marks, stars, notes, it goes every which way. But what I think I heard, at least in relationship to the park, like the bigger park, the majority of you favored more of the options in the park option B. Certainly parking came out as a clear consideration for the gardeners and also looking at the overall parking numbers in the park so that we have enough spots, but making sure that we've got parking and access on that side of the park. I heard that a mix of paths might be desirable in the park, but we want to make sure that we've got ADA accessible paths that go all the way around the park, and that we might want those hard surface paths at least to have one pathway that goes through the park. That's that smooth surface. I heard creek access is important and something we definitely want to do. We want the ADA access that gets us at least down to that first plateau, as well as whatever access we can get down to that amazing natural space. I heard having an outdoor kitchen is good. We need to work on the security of it. That's a given. And I also heard the expansion of those garden plots because we have demand and we're going to have demand in the future. There are lots of other tidbits with benches, and I heard them all and we wrote them all down. Some of that is getting down into design level that I think your feedback is perfect and will incorporate as many of those tidbits and pieces as possible. But those were the kind of the big pieces that I heard kind of universally across the board. In relationship to the building, I heard really building option 2 with the jewel box. Oops.
On the park, did you include a pavilion in the community garden? Did you
Yes.
include?
Yeah, that was part of parking
shade.
or building park. Bleh, can't say all the words. Park option B, the shade
Okay.
structure. I
Okay.
should have written that down. That's a good one. In that community garden area.
Sure. Okay.
The tot lot, definitely heard like the feedback that we want to make sure we've got a buffer and safety, and I'm trying to slide some of those things around. So I think as PlaceWorks goes and digs into this, they'll have to shift some things to make it work and we get down into that detail. And that is really where the Parks Commission kind of digs into some of those plans and takes a harder look at them. But I think that encapsulated most of the the overarching kind of 50,000 foot view comments. If I missed something really significant that I needed to get, then you can correct me. When it comes to the building, I think the majority really were more after restoring that jewel box, building option 2, that restores a piece of the MUD's building, but also has this beautiful shade structure, that it creates a space that's usable. It is a space that we can rent. It is a space that could be used. So I think that's the direction that I heard by and large. I think it's almost a tossed coin on some of them because both options are so beautiful and they both honor MUDs with the ceiling and reusing the pieces. But the jewel box, I think, is where I heard a little bit more interest in trying to retain a piece of that. And I did, Vice Mayor, hear your idea about the bar. I think it's a great question. Again, to analyze and go back and redesign is yet another set of time. So I think my personal direction would probably be we should kind of stick with this direction, honor the tower, which is truly another piece of the icon. And to move to the bar, you're going to be out of alignment with your tower. So I think that may bring that down more. I think when you look at that rendering, if you imagine that room really with the windows and the glass, so you're going to see in on all these different sides, it's not going to feel like a wall like you might be seeing in that rendering. But that's my impression. I'm just sharing it with you because I heard all of what you said, and that's kind of where I got to. But please correct me if you think I need to adjust that.
Yeah, I'll just make one clarification on the bar thing, but I hear what you're saying. But I wasn't I was also looking at kind of preserving the pavilion aspect of the roof piece of the dining room, as well as the bar as the jewel box. So not wiping it out and just making it a patio, but there'd still be that connection to the tower. That was kind of what I had in mind.
So I think that's the only piece that I need clarity on then. I think if I've got the clarity on the park and we want to preserve something, then I need to know if that we are more interested in the way that it's presented or if we're really more interested in a different layout, because it's significantly different. So I need that direction.
And I'll just say, I'm not hard over one way or the other on that. I just threw it out as an idea.
I
So
think the one that's coincident with the tower, it makes more sense architecturally and in layout.
Yeah, and likewise, like, I'm not married to this either. You guys have a much more intimate sense of the property and the physicality. I like the idea in the sense that it preserved the openness of the open pavilion, and I would retain that dining room. I had absolutely envisioned that. I don't know well enough. I like the idea of the closed space kind of being to the right as you're facing otherwise this, but I think you guys know best. And even when it comes down to the jewel box, as Commissioner Chair Keniston Lee said, other Heidi said, I think the question is, what do you guys think the best utilization is? I can imagine things, but I think it's really, you guys need to tell us that it's something you're passionate about.
Yeah. Do you all, they would like some of your feedback as professionals on the building?
On the building structure, the best advisable structure that we want to
Which
keep.
building, the center jewel or the side dining room?
Sure. So as Greg explained, I think we were sort of guided by the architectural composition of the complex and retain that central dining room. I think for us, we can certainly look at the bar volume to see what it does if we were to keep that. I think programmatically, we wanted to be sure that this larger space is the one that makes sense to incorporate into the enclosed design. And there is actually a program for it to be maintained. So this smaller room was contemplated as a small group enclosed space to accommodate like a class. If we think that there is a bigger program that is required or supported, we're certainly happy to look at the alternative to use the bar as an enclosed space.
That answer your question?
Oh, we just want to make sure that because as an architect, they may able to give us much better direction than so we want to see that structure there aesthetically as well as which fits in there, right? So that's where we want to get some guidance from you, what you think is.
Sure. So to answer your question, yes, we think that the smaller dining room is the best alternative to preserve and maintain as the center of the composition, as a center of architectural expression of the building. And it will still maintain the connectivity with the garden the way we see it. So yes, that would be our preference.
That satisfies my question, and I would like to not necessarily hold up the process for additional renderings unless that's something you all want to do. So that satisfies my question and my request.
Yep, no.
Great. Thank you.
So Kathy, you got the direction, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
If that meets all of your general philosophy and we're good with that, then we're going to proceed in this direction with the jewel box room and the park. So anybody else have any final thoughts? I've got plenty of feedback and we'll be able to take this back and move this project forward and try and get it going.
I have one.
thank you, everyone. Thank
you. Hold on. I had one question.
Oh.
The suggestions that I made, though, I know I kind of spoke at the end. Is there any way to at least look at the feasibility of that? for the extending the parking where
Ye-
it's needed?
Yes,
As well as the walkway, creating more direct walkway on that other side of the picnic area?
Yeah, that is exactly what I meant when I said that we wanted to work on parking for gardeners, because I heard that across everywhere that we needed to make sure that we added as much parking as possible. So
Yeah.
I didn't
Okay.
say exactly that, Ben, but it's definitely part of what we'll look
Okay.
at, making sure that we add the additional parking.
Yeah, and if for some reason, I'm just wondering if it sounds like, a few other people also have kind of want to keep some parts of the bar, as a little bit more robust parts of it. So I hope you guys will consider the table at the counter as well.
Absolutely. I think that what we heard, that everybody wanted to reuse as much of the material as possible in whatever way, shape or form that we can. So absolutely.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you to the architects. Thank you to the staff, commissioners, council. I think you got what you needed and can roll with it. And